thank you so much for all coming along. We're very lucky that Frances and Anissha is able to take us through today. What we're going to do is I'm just going to read out the agenda to you guys, and then I'm going to let the girls take over. So we're going to be going, I'll introduce you guys as well. So obviously Frances runs her own agency in the making in Brisbane, and then Anissha actually is working in corporate affairs in-house at Bupa. They both used to work at Thrive together, but they can chat you through. So we'll be going through different agencies, do different types of PR, the different types of PR careers that you can go down, why agency experience is important, what they wish they knew when they were starting out, what is career progression, why upskilling is important, and also networking. We were going to wait to do questions at the end, but the girl said that if you would like to pop in a question throughout the whole session, we can just read them out and go. If you don't feel comfortable saying them out loud, we can put them in the chat box and I can read them out for you as well. And one other thing I wanted to mention, it might be a good idea to, if you guys feel like networking, popping your LinkedIn in the chat box as well, and after can go and network with like-minded people. I'll let you girls take along.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Well, let's chat sort of different agencies and different types of PR. So even Nish and I, we come at things with a very different brain. I am very consumer. Nish is very smart. So we're polar opposites. But, and we've been able to work in the same agency that had both of those, offerings. And then, as you can see, we've then taken our careers in, two wildly different directions as well. But yeah, there's a big span. Nish, I don't know if you want to sort of talk about some of those specifics.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think PR in itself, I guess I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to PR, and I see PR as that mutually beneficial relationship between two types of audiences, right? I mean, like, that's what we all essentially learn at university. And to maintain that relationship, you're going to need different types of, I guess, skill sets and different types of hats that you need to wear. So whether you are kind of that more consumer, fun, glam side of PR, which is definitely Frankie's bag, versus some might say the more boring stuff, but I find super interesting, more in the, reputation management, crisis, corporate, I guess, kind of PR, CSR, that sort of work. Ultimately, they do all fall in as public relations. So there's really kind of different specializations, I guess. But yeah, I think it's super important to know that there is a whole subset of PR as well as part of it.
Yeah. And like for example, if you look at like business to business versus, business to consumer, even in my area of more consumer, more creative kind of comms, we do have clients that talk to both businesses and to everyday people as well within that. So when you actually tried to map it out, it's so complex, but I think that's kind of a really good segue into the next slide, which sort of talks about the different careers that you have, and then why agency is such a good training ground for you to kind of try things out and get a taste for different things and, be able to sort of find where your groove really is. Yeah, take it away.
I was just going to say, I mean, look, agency, I mean, obviously I made my start in agency at Thrive, and I was there for 7 years, which is a very long time in agency land. But, I think agency is such a good start for any budding PR professional, because you do get to kind of, I guess, experience the whole spectrum of PR. And that's, I guess, what I was doing for so long. But then, once you've kind of done that, you do eventually start to specialize and understand, or at least get to know, get familiar with what you really love doing versus what is necessary, and then what you really don't like doing. And I think once you've kind of done that, you kind of then start moving into the different types of PR careers, which obviously is listed here on the slide, and I won't go through it in detail, but there is so much to it. And even now I'm working in Bupa in corporate affairs and comms, but even still within corporate affairs, I bring my PR hat into it, because so much of what I do is that reputation management. So whilst I guess corporate affairs necessarily isn't seen as, I guess, traditional PR, it kind of is, I guess, frankly, is what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Even like looking at this list, right? If you work in agency, you are a publicist, you do internal comms, you do help plan events, you know, yeah, if you specialize sort of in that issues and crisis, you'll do that as well. You know, like we do you know, you kind of scratch everything. And it's really hard to bucket it too, because it also depends on the organization. So if you are working for, you know, a small not-for-profit, you know, in the PR team, you are going to wear all the hats. You're going to do everything. You know, but if you are working, you know, in-house at a big organization with a lot of specialty areas, you know, you won't touch social media, because there will be a whole division that will do that for, you know, that kind of work. So, you know, again, it also depends on the scale of, you know, the company and the type of work that they do. But that's, you know, for us, like that agency experience, you know, if you graduate, you're like, great, I've got a comms degree. What now? Like the actual opportunities and areas and directions that you can go in are so vast that it's a really good place to sort of, you know, try all the flavors.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm probably the biggest advocate for that. I mean, had I not gone into agency, I mean, I had my time in consumer and that was fun for sure. Frankie and I used to work together on a couple of those things. And, you know, I think at least doing that for a while, I got to realize, okay, I know how to do it. It's not, let's say, my regular cup of tea. But I do think, you know, in order to really find what you like doing, having that breadth of experience working across different sectors. I mean, there's nothing better than an agency to get that level of experience and also learn so quickly in your career, because I think there's just more opportunity and the pace of work is probably faster as well. So you do have to kind of learn quickly.
Yeah, and I always talk, and it could definitely be misconstrued when I say you're either agency or you're not. Neither one is better than the other. Like there's a valuable contribution of both sides of that. There's a certain level of, you know, smarts and hustle that it takes on both sides of those. But you've also got to find what's a better natural fit for you. So I've worked with people and I'm like, that is too much detail for me. Please go away with your detail. I can't. I'm a helicopter. I just want to kind of look at it, you know, skim the surface, move on to the next thing, because I'm, you know, I'm tired. I'm, you know, got to try something else. I'm feeling a block. Where I've worked with people in agency, I'm like, you are in-house, because they're sitting there poring over the detail and getting so frustrated that they haven't got the ability to get into the issue and really tackle it and problem solve in a really in-depth manner. And that's how their brain operates. And you know, you need both in the world and in the comms world for them to function together, because if you don't have that yin and yang, you know, you're going to have blind spots.
Yeah, 100%.
Are there any questions so far? We're just kind of talking.
Yeah, we're flying through.
Just having a chat. Please learn something valuable.
You know, guys, feel free to put anything in the chat box as well if you don't feel like saying it out loud, and I can read the questions out for you.
You know what is a funny observation, though, that I had just like a second ago when we're talking about how consumer I am versus corporate? Do you know, in my team, they're like, you're so corporate. Like,
really?
Because I wear a blazer? What? Like, how are we defining this? Because I like spreadsheets and math.
Well, I mean, look, I have always kind of circled around corporate for a very long time, and I think, you know, I love agency and I did it for a long time, and the reason I went in-house is because I just wanted a bit of a break. But more importantly, and you know, I've been in-house only for 7 months, so it's still relatively new, and I'm learning so much in-house that I just could never have learned agency side. Not only from like a stakeholder engagement perspective, but actually like operationally, how does a business work and how do you communicate the needs of a business at that level? Because I don't think agency, you really have that experience to do it, because that's what your in-house comms teams do. Like if you need to communicate different pay cycles, or if you need to communicate change of suppliers for procurement, I mean, you know, these are all really important things that, you know, have an effect on on your entire team and your business. So yeah, I think, you know, there's definitely a yin and yang, as Frankie mentioned, that works really well. And I think, though, the skills that we all learn in PR and comms is 100% transferable. And it's just really what you fancy the most, and what, you know, when you wake up every day, what is it you love doing, and make sure that you do that. Because I think bringing that passion into comms is so important. You know, being communicators, we've got to be empathetic, we've got to be, you know, emotional when we need to be, but we've also got to be, you know, have that distance when we need it as well. So yeah, there's definitely a place for both in the world.
Yeah, that's it. And it's a tough balance to strike. You know, one thing I did 10 months in-house. The rest of my 15 years I'd have been agency. One thing that in going in-house really did wake me up to, and it helped take the frustration out of what used to drive me nuts day to day, is you get exposure to the fact that you are one little piece of a big functioning other things. Like I remember I'd be like, God, this client will not get back to me, will not do this. And I used to get so like, why can't they care as much as I care? And then you go in that other side and you're like, they can't even get a meeting in the diary to talk to the right person to even get approval or information on this, because PR is not their priority. You know, making sales is their priority, or, you know, negotiating the new employee agreements with their staff is the priority. Like, you know, like there's so much that you're like, oh, wow, okay, yes, I'm an important function in a machine, but it is still a much bigger, broader machine that I've, you know, become aware of.
Absolutely. And I would say, like, you know, in a business like Bupa as well, that is global, you've got to learn, or well, I'm still kind of learning the hierarchy and prioritization between group, between APAC, between Australia, and then even within Australia, within health insurance and health services and the different businesses. So it is like this beast that you need to get your head around. And, you know, so many of my colleagues have been working at Bupa for like 8-9 years, and they're still getting their heads around it because it is such a huge business. And I think I saw a question about advice going from it in-house to agency, or agency to in-house? From in-house to agency. I mean, it's really, really interesting. And I don't know if we're maybe touching on future slides, so stop me if I am, Frankie. I think agency, the biggest thing when we were hiring, and Frankie can speak to this as well, it's the mindset and the attitude that is the biggest difference. Because at least when I've been in that position for agency, you need to know the skills. Once you've got the skills, and they're pretty, I say basic, but once you understand the concepts, you can apply it to different situations, different sectors. So that constant curiosity and the attitude is what makes the difference from someone who thrives in an agency versus someone who comes into agency and doesn't really know what to do next because they're used to, let's say, a slower pace of working.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to the real core difference is how the business makes money, right? So when you work in-house, the business makes money in another area and you help them make that money. If you are in agency, the agency is making money off that specialty, and they do that by billing time. So if the pace is not there and the billable hours are not there to match, you know, the outputs and what you're justifying to clients to pay the invoices, there is no business, there is no agency. So what you are selling is time, and that pace part comes into it and it's like, you know, before, if there's somebody that just, you know, wants to pour over detail and, you know, understand and do, you know, 20 research papers before getting in to do a release, you will struggle in agency because you don't have time, and then you can't justify to a client, I've billed you 50 hours for this one press release because I did a whole lot of research to understand it better. They look at the bottom line and go, well, sorry, no. And then the agency doesn't make money and no one has a job. So, you know.
100%. And I think
that's a brutal stick.
I mean, look, yes, but it is ultimately true. And, you know, in agency, that's why the pace is always the most important. Being able to multitask and being able to jump ship between clients, between sectors, you know, like 1 minute I'd be working in, you know, finance, and the next minute I'll be working in hospitality. And, you know, because you've got timesheets and you've got billable time, you need to be able to make that mental shift quite quickly. And it's that, I guess, it's that skill that I think is one of the most valuable in agency. But then I think equally as important is knowing how to prioritize your work. I think sometimes something that you really love doing might be a low priority for the agency. So it's just making sure that you are picking the right things at the right time to meet deadlines of your managers, of your clients, because your clients demand a lot from you. And I can say now that I'm client side and I'm also working with agency, it is very, very strange. But all of a sudden, my expectations are incredibly high because you are paying a lot of money for a lot of people to do work that you could probably do. But the only reason you're getting them to do it is because they can do it faster than you can. So that is probably the biggest thing that I've learned in working with agency from in-house. So yeah, it makes all of a sudden it's like the puzzle pieces are coming together and I'm like, oh, that's why pace and prioritization is so important in agency.
Yeah. And that's not to say that going the other way from agency to in-house doesn't have its own unique challenges as well. Like I remember, because I'm probably undiagnosed, but like I'd swap, get distracted. You can't put me on the same thing for too long. I get too restless. But I had to sit down in there and go, well, actually my role is to understand fully the picture so I can brief that in to somebody who can do it quickly and give them the critical information. But I have to sit here and understand the full scope of that picture. And, you know, I would sit down with, you know, economic advisors and go, okay, explain this to me like I'm 5 because I need to, you know, and I've got to then tease out and go, well, what's important for my agency to know so that they can go in 2 hours, you know, bash out a press release. It's going to get me, you know, a good story. So there's challenges both ways, but it's interesting, the dynamic to sort of, you know, experience both.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. Should we find out what's on the next slide? Because I have totally forgotten.
We can talk about this for ages.
We can go in whatever direction we find. Which we knew.
Yes.
Nish, you want to kick us off?
What I wish I knew. Okay, I think for me, this is probably, I can't actually even remember what we said in our rehearsal, Frankie. But for me, I think it's that don't be in a rush. I think when I was in agency, everything was about the next promotion. It was about the title. It was about how much I'm getting paid, and your status, if you will, in an agency, right? Because agency, it's so obvious what the hierarchy is, and the ladder is just right in front of you. So if you're an ambitious person, how can you not want to climb that ladder as fast as you can? So I think for me, that is probably one of the biggest things I wish I knew. It's just take it slow and enjoy the ride. And I think, you know, in doing that, it's so important to make sure that you master your basics in those first few years really, really well. Because there is nothing worse than getting promoted because, you know, you've negotiated it, but you don't necessarily have the skills to fulfill that role. And then once
you're there, way of saying threaten to leave.
Yes. This is why I'm in corporate, guys. I'm very but you know, I think it's having those skill sets and getting them done right in those first few years is so important. Because once you do that, like, you will just fly, honestly, like in your career. Because comms, as much as we all like to think it's incredibly hard, it's actually, I mean, for me, really simple. You get your concepts, you communicate. It's about empathy. It's about understanding the other perspective and talking to the other audience and telling them what they want to hear while conveying your message across. I think, you know, that skill set never changes. So taking time to perfect it, get it right so you can do it with your eyes closed is something I wish I knew and had been told when I was younger, for sure.
Yeah, I'll start my answer by telling you something a little bit embarrassing. And that is, a couple of years ago, I apologized to my first proper agency boss, and said, I'm so sorry I was such a brat. I must have been horrific to manage. because kind of a bit like Niche, I was really, like what she was saying is I was so competitive and I was ambitious and I wanted the next one. As soon as I got it, I would literally print out the job role above me and highlight all the things I thought I was really good at and stick it in front of them and be like, well, why aren't I, and it was really like bullish with it. And sometimes it's just time in the seat and experience and, getting the skills to do it. But the one thing that in that process where I really lost sight of myself, and this would be things that I wish I knew, is the only race you are running is your own. Do not look around at what other people have, because the second that you invest any of your energy in what that person has, what that person is on, how long that person's been in that role to get that title, you have totally all that time and energy could be in being a better version of yourself. Like that's why spend your energy there? All you're going to do is give other people an opportunity to then leg up over you because they're focused on becoming a better practitioner.
Yeah.
And then that's going to get recognized sooner than anything else. So you just got to go and go, okay, well, I do want that promotion. What do I got to do to get there? I'm going to spend that time instead of finding out what my colleague's salary is or, stressing about that. I'm going to go do a training course. And then I'm going to tell my boss I did this training course and I've got this extra skill. I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to smash it out of the park for my clients and then come to my next annual review and be like, boom, look how many great results I've got, and that's when you spend your time on doing those things, your career will follow.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think the competitive side and, the promotions is very agency driven. I think if you are growing up in that or, growing up in the agency, it's kind of, part and parcel of being an agency, right? You just work as hard as you can, you work as fast as you can to get the next promotion. But I'll tell you the biggest lesson I learned in the last let's say a year since I've known I kind of wanted to come in-house. When you're in-house, no one cares. Literally no one cares. All they care about is how good you are at your job. Yeah. Titles don't matter at the end of the day. Whether you're a manager, whether you're a senior manager or an advisor and a senior advisor, if you're good at your job, the opportunities are going to be there for you. And in-house they will create roles that suit your skill set if you are just a great practitioner. And I think that for me is probably the biggest learning. Now I haven't 100% learned it yet because I'm an incredibly competitive person, but I'm slowly getting there and continuously talking myself down and saying, you know what, just chill out. Like just because someone else is now, I don't know, a business director of an agency doesn't mean that I can't also have been in that position. I've obviously just chosen a different avenue because, I've a passion somewhere else. So yeah, 100% focus on your own race, do what makes you happy, and slow down.
Love it. What have we got next? What is, oh wow, this is good.
Yeah, you can start this one because I started the other one.
Well, and I think we're really great at segueing, considering both of us are very surprised by what slide comes next.
Yeah,
like we couldn't have geared this better, because career progression sounds like it's up, but it's not always.
Yeah,
career progression can be side to side. Career progression can be broadening your skills by trying something new. Career progression can be a total change. It can be going back to something that you left and thinking the grass was greener and then it wasn't greener and going tucked between my legs. Sorry, I was right the first time. Career progression is whatever's right for you, is how I would say it.
Yeah, 100%. And this is a new learning for me because, again, in that move from agency where you're just so conscious of the upwards ladder, and when when I left agency or when I left my PR agency, I knew I wanted to specialize in sustainability communications, and I took a sidestep into it. But again, that sidestep, I shouldn't necessarily refer to it as a sidestep because it wasn't.
Yeah, it's not.
I was learning an entirely new skill. I was learning like science and engineering and all of these really important things that I needed to learn to communicate sustainably properly. And, that is career progression because I was specializing in what I was doing. So I think specialization is just an important part of career progression because it is. Like if you're ready to specialize, it means you've you've decided what you're going to be doing, for at least a foreseeable future. So 100% believe that, sidestep or growing sideways, you're increasing your breadth and your vastness of skills is 100% career progression as well.
I agree.
All right, Rebecca has said, love what you just said about career progression. I'm at a stage where I work in email marketing, but I would love to sidestep into PR and comms. Any advice for career changing and what skills from my decade in digital marketing would be transferable?
Yeah, look, a lot of them. And certainly, particularly if you've worked, say if you're going for an agency role and you have had like client service and account processes and you can do that sort of thing, obviously there's things like writing, how to frame, a story, narrative, how to do those sorts of things you can pull up. And then likewise, if you're going in-house, you can, there's another variable set of skills that you can pull up from your other job. One thing with sidestepping that my personal recommendation, whether this is right or wrong or not, is be prepared to go down and fight to get back up rather than expecting or applying for, the same salary, the sort of similar title, because at the end of the day, it may not necessarily, there won't be a full transition of skill sets. There will be areas where you need to learn. But if I had an opportunity to have someone and they said, look, I'll come in, I'm going to take less money and a title cut. And I want to give, let's build into my contract that in 6 months' time, if I haven't proven myself and like, this is what I'd like my revision to be and my new title to be, these are the KPIs kind of attached to it. Like if you invest in me, I'll invest in you, and then you just prove it.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the smartest way to do that is you go, yeah, there's a short-term pain here, but I will build in, a safety net to make sure I'm not completely, stiffing myself out of, a future and, rent. But, if you show that value in your willingness to learn, that you're willing to commit to that, your employer, if they're a good one, is likely to come to the table on that as well.
Yeah. And I would probably, the other thing I would add to that response and to your question, Rebecca, is and I'm going to throw back to Frankie because I think she can answer this a lot better than I can. But this like merging of worlds between digital, PR, comms, and social, advertising, media buying, like it is all just slowly, at least in my last kind of, 12 years of working in this industry, it is just merging. It is slowly becoming one, like brand, marketing, comms, PR, corporate affairs, like they're just getting closer and closer and closer as time goes on. And I think that's because this new digital world, and I'm saying new because I'm talking about AI and all this sort of stuff, it's really, it's at this point of convergence. So I think just because, let's say you're in email marketing, that is a very key tactic from a PR and comms perspective to communicate to your audience. So I'd almost say you are a specialist in that particular channel of communication. Now it's about learning the other channels of communication so you can bring in that kind of broader comms and PR lens into your work. So I think, it's that difference between what sits up top, which is your, let's say your umbrella, that's your public relations, and then your strategy and then your tactics, and that's your channels of communication. So I think they're all kind of converging into one. And at the end of the day, what channels we use for PR can be the same channels that an advertiser uses. And likewise, an advertiser, or marketing potentially use as well. So I think that's important to consider as well. I don't know, Frankie, if you want to add anything on that, because I'm not a digital person.
You said that so eloquently. I'm like, oh, damn. But if it helps, sometimes I don't even know what we do. And then I had a client that we did some work with last year they had was mainly internal communications, but it needed to be positioned well. So they utilized our expertise to do that. And his email to us, he doesn't even know what we do. I wouldn't even know how to define what we do for them. But he's emailed me. He's like, hey, I've got some other things happening. Want to make some changes to our website, how we're positioning ourselves to market, and just, general stuff. And he literally said stuff within like inverted commas around it, because we don't know what we're doing and how we're going to do it or what form that's going to take. All he knows is we've got to kind of wrap something up and make it sound good and appealing to their, audiences. And that's what we do.
Pretty much.
Rebecca's just logged off. She's like, no,
she's like, I'm done.
I'm out. Upskilling, I think if you looked at the industry I went into 15 years ago versus now, like I would be a dinosaur. You have to upskill. It changes all the time. The world's merged, like things. If you are not open to change and to agility and to always learning, you're stuffed.
Yeah, and I'd also say the responsibility of a PR and comms person is to sometimes also bring the outside world in. And that means understanding everything else that's going on and how that is going to affect your role, but also going to how that's going to affect your client or your business that you're working with. So AI, obviously, hottest topic at the moment. And, even in-house, we're talking about how can we as communicators use this responsibly, even when we are talking about things, because in corporate affairs, half of our work is highly confidential. So how do we navigate that as communicators, but also at the same time use that technology? So this big part of confidentiality and security. I mean, I've never had to worry about security and cyber hacks in my life in comms, but all of a sudden I'm like, shit, I'm going to need to. Like the amount of cyber attacks that's happening all across the world, we're going to need to understand how that works. So should we ever be in a position that we need to communicate it, we know how to do it and we know what it is. So I think, yeah, it's our role as communicators to stay relevant with everything else that's going on in the world, because you never know when you'll need it.
Yeah. And this is going to sound so dorky, especially from the consumer one of the team coming to this call. But I really believe in learning and always learning. I know that sounds like I've made it up and that I'm just pretending, but it is something I believe in. Even with I like reading, and I'll read one book for me and my enjoyment, and then I'll read one thing that's educational, and I switch and I alter between the two just to make sure that's always happening. But I think the best way that somebody said it to me that I've used again is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Level up. Like that's the most important thing. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room, because then you're not learning and you're not getting better. And if you're not getting better every day, you'll be left behind, in a week's, time. So that's how I see it.
Spot on. That's exactly the advice that my dad always gives me. Don't be the smartest person in the room. And if you are, it's time to go. So, exactly. I think learning is something that is lifelong. Now I'm sounding like my father. It's a bit creepy, but
and then I just saw I had his nose. I'm like, oh, this is not going well for me.
Whether you're 30 or whether you're 60, I think it's so important to keep learning, because it's just I don't think that's necessarily a comms professional thing. I think that's just like a career first person. Someone who wants to do good and have purpose in their role. And I think learning is a key part of that. Yeah.
Amazing. Networking. I, believe it or not, considering I can actually talk underwater, I hate networking. Hate it. I sit in the corner of the room and talk to the people I know kind of girl. But you have to do it at the end of the day. If you don't, networks are who you rely on. Until the past 2 weeks, all of the jobs that I've positioned in my agency, I didn't even put up a LinkedIn post. I've never advertised those roles before. This is the first time, because all I did is I just put in a couple of calls and said, who do you know? Have any recommendations? And then I'd fill it in a second with just through networks. And so much of that happens. So many career opportunities happen behind closed doors.
Absolutely. And that is interestingly how I made my way in-house as well, because going from agency, especially when you've been in agency for like 11 years of your career, in-house are kind of like, you're clearly an agency girl, why are you coming in now? And just trying to jump out in the resume in this extremely competitive environment, where permanent full-time jobs are very hard to find, and most of them are 3-month contracts or whatever. Networking is so important, because this role that I got was literally from a contact that I made at orientation day on my first day at university. And it was, also network. It wasn't necessarily anything that I did to nurture that relationship. But obviously, in time, both of us had been kind of keeping up with each other on LinkedIn. And also at that point, when you want to ask for a favor and you say, hey, can you put in a good word, you feel comfortable going back on LinkedIn and saying, hey, I actually saw this role, you're kind of working there, do you know anyone, can you give me some advice, blah blah blah. And that's kind of how it happens, really. So never be afraid to also, as part of your network, go back and talk to people who you may not have recently spoken to, because that first impression that you make sometimes can be so strong that people actually remember who you are 10 years down the track. So yes, first impressions, networking, incredibly important. I'm like Frankie, I'm an introvert. So the idea of going on my own to a networking event with people I know, well, people I don't know, is incredibly terrifying. I almost just have to put my big girl pants on, and I mean that literally. Like, I have a pair of pants that I'm like, yep, this is like my get shit done outfit. And I'll do whatever I need to do to give myself that self-confidence that I need to walk in a room and, what my husband calls, put my PR face on, and just smile through it, be the communicator that we all are, and that is listen, understand, ask, be curious. Because I think that is how you make first impression, and that's also how you build your network.
I go into these things, I set myself a KPI. Like, it used to be when business cards were more popular, I was like, I'm going to go out of here with 3 business cards. Now it might be like, I'm going to meet 3 people and add them on LinkedIn. And like, if I had like a goal in mind, it helped me kind of have a sense of purpose and achievement to go and do that. Now I also focus a lot on, well, but with those business cards, what's my next move? So I personalize, like adding on LinkedIn, and then, a day or two later, sending a message and saying, hey, it was really nice to meet you the other night. I know that you said that you were looking for someone that does balloon archways. I remember this supplier that I had, and like, give them a valuable piece of, something from the conversation, jog the memory, show that you thought about them afterwards. Flattery does get you really far. And if you're worried that you don't know how to hold a conversation, ask questions.
Yeah.
You don't have to hold a conversation. All you have to do is ask questions.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a big part of that is attitude again. How the vibe that you give off is so important in these, whether it's online and whether it's in person. And, I'm not someone who openly goes to in-person networking events. Most of my networking I do ultimately on LinkedIn. And being the PR, visibility person that I am, I know that my LinkedIn is incredibly important. And the content that I put on LinkedIn is stuff that I, as my brand, let's say, want to be associated with. And you never know who's reading it, who's connecting with it, and who's going to message you. And, in the last kind of 3 years since I've said, okay, I'm specializing in sustainability, the amount of sustainability connections I've made online is something I never would have dreamed about. And it's gotten to the point now where I, see someone I admire who's doing exactly what I want to do, but like, I don't know, in Iceland, literally. I just message and I say, hey, here's me, here's what I'm doing. I love what you're doing. I just want to, connect and see what you're up to so I can learn. And all of a sudden we've started a conversation and we trade, industry news with each other. So I think, yeah, sometimes doing it behind the screen is a little bit easier for me. But being yourself every single step of the way is incredibly important. As much as networking can be daunting, you do have to be true to yourself a little bit, because people can always tell the fake networkers from the real ones.
Yeah. And that's for me, like if you looked at my public LinkedIn, you'd be like, this bird pops up once a year when she wants something. Like that's it. I'm not an active person, but when I do that, like, oh, congratulations, I feel so fake doing it. I do a lot in private message, or I'll like send a text message instead. Like I'll see something on LinkedIn and then I'll message the person on my phone. I'll be like, oh my God, you got a new job here. Blah, blah. That's around the corner from my office. Let's grab a drink on Wednesday. Like what days do you do the office? That's probably because I live in a much more offline world from my era. I tend to do a lot more of that. But
you're not a dinosaur, Frankie.
From my era. From my era, please. When I started in PR, there weren't online databases of journalists. We had a textbook called Maggie G's. It came out once a year.
Yeah. That was me an intern, actually. We had a like.
Do you have a Maggie G's?
No, we had MediaNet. It was a book at that time.
Yeah,
this is when MediaNet had its day.
You're like a young gen.
I know, I am.
And these books used to cost about $800, and you'd be in the office and you'd literally be calling out, "Who's got the Maggie G's?"
Oh my God.
And
we've sidetracked. Apologies.
Sorry, but yeah, no, but that's the thing. If I was to change that, I live in an offline, I have more like one-on-one sort of side conversations. That's how I feel comfortable. So, but that's being authentically me, and I'm still networking. I'm just doing it in my different way.
Absolutely.
I think that's it.
It is too. Well done. Q&A.
It's 14 minutes to spare.
Oh, we did well. We didn't do too many sidetracks.
Does anyone have any questions at all from the session at all?
I'm an open book, so I'm happy to share anything.
Scarily so. Could be dangerous. Maybe we should do like a UK exclusive subscriber version where we actually stop the recording and then we have like an offline chat.
Oh my God, that sounds wonderful.
Sammy has asked, what are some common challenges you face in your role and how do you overcome them? It's a good question.
Who wants to go first? You go first.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I'm in an interesting career transition where I now run a business as well as working in PR. So my challenges now are often in regards to areas of life I never thought I would touch, around employment contracts and, changing of this, law and what that means for this, and, understanding income tax and knowing the difference between a markup and a margin. And I find it's exciting to be entering a new era, but I also, it can be isolating as well, because I am, operating in a field where I feel like I'm on my own, but my PR friends who are very great PR bouncing boards for that work haven't done this before. So I'm starting to, my version of, well, how do I network? How do I upskill? How do I broaden my horizons? Is I need to be starting to meet and ask questions and seek advice from a whole other new group of people, and learn from them, and then be able to apply that to my role now and what that means for me. So that's it's probably a unique and not very helpful answer, but it's my own brutal truth.
Talk about being true to yourself, Frankie. That's all you need. Just brutal truth that reflects you. I think for me, one of the common challenges that I face, and probably have faced in my career, is learning how to work with different personalities. I think whether you're an agency or whether you're in-house, everyone likes to work differently and everyone has a different personality. And as a communicator, it's important to build for me, it's so important to build an authentic connection and relationship with people who have different personalities. Like, you know, someone that I am, you know, that I might need something with on a daily basis, to be able to do my work well, that person and I probably will never be friends outside of work. But we've got to be able to have, you know, a mutually respectful relationship so that we can continue our work together. And, you know, overcoming those kind of challenges can be daunting and terrifying. But I can tell you that, you know, in my career, there's probably been about small amount, but about 2 people that I've had conflict with. And more often times than not, we've actually become incredible friends after. And that is because, you know, you take the time to almost conflict resolution. That's not a word. You take time to resolve the conflict. There we go. And really try and understand who that person is at a really fundamental level. And I think once you take the time to do that, you can work with any personality. And a big part of that is people reading and body language and nonverbal communication. And I think that is so underrated. That is a very underrated skill. And to survive in agency and to survive in-house, you need to be able to read between the lines. And even when you're working with clients, you need to be able to do that. So I think that's probably a very common challenge that I face on a daily basis. It's constantly people reading, and trying to understand what makes the other person who they are so that I can build that relationship with them.
Yeah. Have you read, there's a book called Surrounded by Idiots?
No, but I love that already.
Yeah, I picked it up being like, oh, can relate. But actually it goes into the different personality types and what kind of makes people tick, and like how to engage with people that, you know, see things differently from you. And it's actually like, it's a really good
interesting
version of that where you kind of go, oh yeah. And then, but then also with the personality types, you start trying to then label everyone really quickly without being an
absolutely.
Oh, you're a red. 100%.
I've done that. I've done that. I'm like, that's a red. That's what I need to do to help you. Thanks.
Have you read it, Dakota?
No. I was going to say, I actually have 2 questions that 2 girls asked me to pop in as well, that couldn't make it today. And one of them said, what's the number one thing a PR professional should upskill in 2024?
Oh, you know what? I'd actually take it old school. Pick up the phone.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
phone calls. I feel like we've all forgotten how to ring someone and have a conversation. Do you know how quickly things get solved when you just have a back and forth, like without 6,000 emails and 3 days delay? That would be my number one skill, would be have a phone call. Learn how to do that.
Yeah, okay. That is such, but yeah, I love that. Okay, I'm going to go the other end of the spectrum. And I'm going to say sustainability, because that's obviously what I specialize in. I think sustainability in itself is an incredibly complex topic. And to be able to communicate that authentically, avoiding ACCC issues and greenwashing, you need to understand the very core concepts of it, because what we're seeing right now is a big drive from marketing to talk about sustainability, because that's going to drive sales. But I will tell you now, as a purist, if sustainability is linked to sales, it is not sustainability. And for a comms person to be able to distinguish that, and I guess almost, I hate using the word spin, but it is what we do, unfortunately, to be able to spin the message to what we need it so that it sounds authentic, and it is authentic, like legit, with evidence, and you back that shit up, then by all means communicate your heart out. But you do need to understand the very bare basics of sustainability, to make sure that you are not oversimplifying what you're talking about, because it is incredibly complex. So I think sustainability has to be one of those skills that PR and comms people understand, because now and moving forward, it's going to be probably one of the biggest drivers in conversation moving forward.
Yeah. We have another question here saying, how was your journey in a quick sum after you graduated? It's obviously a bit different now being a long time ago, but yeah, it'll be interesting to hear that as well.
Oh, okay. Mine's a little bit complicated. So I studied here as an international student, and getting hired was bloody difficult because I was an international student and I didn't have visas. But so I won't go into the gruesome details of how I made it. But what I will say is it was tough. It was really hard. And I think even for me 10 years ago, applying for roles like PR coordinator roles, PR assistant roles, I was either told I've too much experience or not enough experience to get a role starting. And it was extremely disheartening. And I did that for about 2 years. And I'm sure a lot of graduates face that today, because even now I'm very, very wary. I'm very wary of it because I've been through it. So a lot of what I did, to be honest, was build my own portfolio so that if anyone had the nerve to say to me, you don't have enough experience, I can say, well, actually, this is what I've done. And I've done this role already, and going back and negotiating. And there's nothing worse than selling yourself. I hate it. I really, really hate it. But I think it is so important now to be able to do that and almost take your own initiative, really, to build that portfolio and not rely on an employer who's just going to see your grades after you finish university and be like, oh, great, you got a HD, awesome, we're going to hire you. That's not good enough. So take the time to really do a lot of homework outside, do freelance stuff. Like if you've got a friend who's really keen on doing a startup, do their PR plan. You know, it's going to take a day of your time, but even just doing that and putting it in a portfolio saying you've got it, it's just going to help your case out a lot more. And that's definitely what worked for me.
That's awesome advice.
Yeah.
There is another question here as well, is what's the best advice that you've ever received to help your PR career that you received from someone else?
You go first, Frankie.
I mean, I probably used my best line before around, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, and always learn. I think the main piece, and I'm not going to word it as it was worded because I can't remember it. I'm drawing a blank. But essentially, the summary of the advice is it's a long race. Like it is a marathon, not a sprint. And success isn't a straight line. Success is curly. It's all over the place. It looks like falling down and getting back up. It looks like trying something and failing. And just remember that, and don't be too hard on yourself about that. Know that sometimes there's going to be sacrifices and setbacks, but actually most of the good things that you will learn and your opportunities will come from those really like the dark ages, the dark times, and just hold your head up high and remember that there's days from now to figure all of that out.
Love that.
I like that. My best advice goes out to something that I learned probably when I was an AM level at agency, and that is think time. I think so much of us in this fast-paced world, and especially whether you're an agency or just life generally, we're always so eager to just move on and do the next thing, but we're not necessarily being strategic in how we think, our recommendations as consultants and our recommendations as professionals to other parts of the business. And you only get to, I guess, use that muscle when you have time to think. And what I used to do and how I used, like now I just do it automatically. But when I first started, I would just block half an hour every morning for think time in my calendar, and it wouldn't be billable time, obviously. Lol, imagine me.
Yeah. Is that before or after news ops?
Before news ops, Frankie.
You are a morning
I always used to do it on my travel to work. And that was timed for me because I always feel really restless when I'm going to work, and I'm like, okay, I've got X, Y, and Z to do. But instead of thinking that, I'm like, okay, here's all the things that can go wrong. this week, or here are all the recommendations that I need to make this week. Why am I making that recommendation? And actually taking that time to think is incredibly important. So yeah, diarize think time. Don't underestimate it. Yeah, it's super important.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Good answers. And there's another question here is, what was the most surprising or unexpected thing that you found in your first agency job?
I mean, everything was surprising in my first agency job because I had no idea what I was doing.
I'd agree with you, Frankie. I think for me, the most surprising thing was like, oh, this is agency.
Yeah. My most surprising thing was that Dentsu had a chip cupboard and they were free.
Well, yeah, I think like I always expected jobs to just be like, I don't know, serious. And I didn't expect, one, to have so much fun with the people that I work with. And two, what we as PR people actually did. Because I mean, let's be honest, like you study it at university, but it's not until you actually do it, not as an intern, like I mean like actually as a profession, that you're like, oh, this is PR. So I think that was probably the most unexpected thing in my first job.
I was going to ask another question, but Frankie, I'll just ask you, you got time before your flight? I wasn't sure what time you had to head back to Brisbane.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I have time. The only thing is if I get a phone call, it's the hotel telling me I need to check out.
All right, we got two last questions here. Julia has said, what courses would you recommend to advance in PR skills, and ones that are more accepted organization courses that hiring managers view as accredited?
Controversially, I don't really care about courses. I care about experience. I'd rather see an internship, an unpaid internship, than a course. But that's just me.
No, I agree with you. I don't think, like, you know, no matter how many degrees you get, no one really cares. It's experience. Sure. I mean, I've said this to my husband, like he's got 3 degrees and he's like, oh, nobody wants to hire me and I've got 3 degrees. And I'm like, well, no one cares about your degrees, doll. It's about experience and your attitude. So yeah, attitude, I would add to that too.
Yeah. I look for experience before I look for academic credentials.
And if you are,
I hope that doesn't shatter any dreams.
Well, I was just going to maybe close it out so I don't shatter any dreams. But if you do want to do like some sort of skill uplifting courses or whatever, ask your employers, because each employer will have their own preferred list of people, and just do it that way, because at least that way your employers recognize it, and that's kind of the most important. And if it's that promotion that you're seeking, you're going to get it after you do that course. So yeah, speak to your employers.
I think Luna has a question.
Yes, hi. Thanks so much. I'm Luna. I'm working in marketing currently at the Australian Ballet. Thank you so much for your time. That was all so helpful. I'll be quick. I'm wondering, just looking at the PR industry in the next 10 years, what's a development that you're really excited about you can see in the industry, and what's something that you're a bit nervous about?
Okay, I think what I can see coming is the delineation between PR, comms, advertising, marketing, and brand. I think that is just going to just not exist very soon. I think this kind of holistic nature to communications is going to be a lot more popular. So yeah, I mean, people in comms these days, you know, spend time in marketing because they need to understand how marketing works to be able to do their job effectively. So I think that's probably where I would see. I also think that would make me really nervous though, because the people in these industries, we all kind of like secretly don't like each other. Like there's just natural rivalries between like, you know,
we're fighting over budgets.
Yeah, pretty much. Like PR and advertising, like we're never friends. One is authentic, one is, you know, one-way communication. Marketing is driven by sales. PR is about genuine relationships. Like I think there's a lot of I don't want to say conflicts, but maybe I'll say conflicts. There's a lot of conflicts between the different schools of comms. So I think how it comes together is going to be really interesting to watch.
My answer to both would be technology, because we've got an exciting opportunity even to use things like AI to create shortcuts to get information and knowledge and research really, really quickly. But I also worry that there will be a cost in quality and human relationships and nuance, which I think is a really important part of, you know, communication and the specialty of the role. So it's kind of that old adage about, you know, using the power for good and not for bad. So it excites me, but it also worries me that people might take advantage or become lazy with it in a not a good way.
Yeah. We've got time for one last question from Jackie, and she has just said that she's relocated to Brisbane and she's wondering where you would find industry events and opportunities for networking. Frankie's probably the best for that, being in Brisbane.
Yeah, look, you know what? It is actually pretty dire, the networking. So it kind of depends on the purpose. So for us with journalist relationships, there's a great group called Women in Media, and they have, you know, really great journalists that do the headline speeches. They do really great things. If I am on a new business hunt and I want new clients, I'll look at industry specific events. So if I want a property client, I'm going to go to a property council event and sort of step outside my comfort zone and do that sort of stuff. But if you're looking for like career, you know, sort of side support and network, the PRIA, although it just rebranded and I don't remember what the new brand is. But they, you know, there's ones where you can meet like-minded peers and, you know, potential employers and stuff in those sorts of groups. So I guess at the end of the day, have a think about what the purpose of that networking event is for you and what you need to get out of it, and select accordingly. Or just go to the pub.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
Oh, good. Well, thank you so much for joining, guys. And yes, we're lucky that these ladies got to share their experience. Really appreciate it.
Amazing.
Pleasure. And look, speaking of networking, connect with us.
Yeah.
Have a chat. Have a chat.
Awesome. And we'll be able to send the recording out as well.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully this was helpful.
Yes. All righty. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.